Skagway, Alaska. At least 100,000 gold rush stampeders passed through here en route to the Klondike. Now a similar number of summer visitors board the White Pass and Yukon Railroad and ride the Scenic Railway of the world. Construction of the line began in May 1898. Too late for the majority of the stampeders, who were prepared to wait for neither man nor iron horse. 2 years later, in July 1900, the last spike was driven home. 110 miles of steel had been laid through some of the most rugged and beautiful scenery in the world. With nothing but horsepower, black powder, and determination, the right-of-way was driven through solid rock, across gaping canyons, and along precipitous ledges. The line passes through two countries, the United States and Canada, terminating in what became the capital of the Yukon Territory, Whitehorse. For those who found the gold and could afford to ride home in style, a comfortable railroad journey was a welcome substitute to the Trail of '98. Today, the mines are close to silent, but the railroad operates its ever-popular summer excursion service along 40 miles of the original 110. From the port of Skagway, Alaska, to the headwaters of the Yukon River, Canada's Lake Bennett. So let's join the History Train on a typical summer afternoon excursion. Each train has its own narrator.
We're now entering the White Pass and Yukon Route rail yards, Mile 2. Now this is where we maintain our cars and locomotives. On the left-hand side of the train is rotary snowplow number 1. 2 rotary plows were used for snow removal until the 1960s, and later, specially equipped bulldozers were used to clear the tracks. In 1898, there were 2 primary routes to the goldfields once you reached Alaska. The White Pass Trail, which began in Skagway, and which we'll be following today, and the Chilkoot Trail, which began 9 miles west of here in the town of Dyea. At the time, there was much debate over which was the quickest and the easiest. The Chilkoot was slightly shorter, but 500 feet higher. The White Pass, although longer, had the advantage of being able to accommodate pack animals, and that tipped the scales in its favor. Mile 2.5, the Gold Rush Cemetery. This is where many of Skagway's early pioneers are buried. It's also the final resting place of notorious Skagway conman Jefferson Randolph Smith.
Smith had devised several ways to separate the new arrivals from their money. The most ingenious was his telegraph office. You'd go in the front door and the telegrapher would inform you that for $5 you could send a telegram anywhere in the world. And for those prepared to wait, a reply, collect of course, would probably be forthcoming. Understandably, no one actually followed the telegraph line out of the back of the office, where it ended abruptly in the murky waters of Lynn Canal.
This is mile 5.8 on your rail map. Look out the right-hand side of the train. We'll be passing an old White Pass caboose. This was recently put here for use by hikers on their way to the Denver Glacier. As we cross the east fork of the Skagway River, you'll notice the water is very gray. It's also very cold, having come from the glacier. Ladies and gentlemen, we're passing by mile 6.9. This is Rocky Point. From here, you've got an excellent view down the valley to Skagway. Mount Harding and the Harding Glacier form a very dramatic backdrop. Just below us are the remains of the Brackett Wagon Road. George Brackett was a former mayor of Minneapolis who tried to build a road to the White Pass summit during the gold rush. Looking out across the canyon, you can see Buchanan Rock, mile 8.8. George Buchanan was an East Coast businessman who took underprivileged boys on major trips into Alaska and Canada in the 20s and 30s. You may have noticed that our engineer is easing back on the throttle. Now that's because we're coming to mile 9, Pitchfork Falls. One of the many waterfalls along the White Pass and Yukon route, you'll see this one coming down on the east side of the train. Pitchfork Falls comes out of Goat Lake, high on the mountainside. Mile 10.4, Black Cross Rock. This is kind of hard to see. It's about 80 feet below us in a small clearing. A black cross marks the site of a tragic accident that took place during the construction of the railroad. 2 men were buried under a 100-ton piece of granite in a blasting accident. Rather than retrieve their bodies, a simple black cross was placed as a memorial to them and the 35 other men who died during the construction of the railroad. Next, mile 11.5, Bridal Veil Falls. The water comes off the Mount Cleveland glaciers and splits into dozens of cataracts. At the beginning of the gold rush, it was wondered if a railway could be built across the White Pass. Canadian Michael J. Heaney believed it could. The construction of the White Pass and Yukon Route Railway remains to this day one of the world's great engineering achievements. Milepost 12.3, White Pass City, was actually called Heaney Station back in 1898, named for Michael J. Heaney, the WP&YR construction contractor. While the tunnel above the railroad on the High Line was being completed, freight was transferred down a steep tramway to waiting pack horses at White Pass City. We're going to be making a brief stop here. dropping off some hikers. They're headed up to the Lawton Glacier, which is 5 miles from here. At the glacier, the U.S. Forest Service maintains a cabin that hikers can use. Down the valley, the site of White Pass City can be seen from here. This was the last stopping place for the Stampeders before they made their ascent of the White Pass summit. At one time, as many as 5,000 men were camped along the river. Assorted cafes, stores, bunkhouses, and saloons operated out of tents and hastily built cabins. The town site is now covered with brush. This is one of the most spectacular scenes on our journey today. After we cross Glacier Gorge, we'll be entering mile 16, Tunnel Mountain. This is the only tunnel from the original construction of the railroad. It's 250 feet long and required 450 tons of dynamite to blast it through the mountain. The mountain across from us is called Mine Mountain. From 1925 to 1931, this was a working silver mine. It's also where we'll occasionally see some mountain goats. This is mile 17, Inspiration Point. Across the Lynn Canal, you can see Mount Harding and the Harding Glacier. And in the very far distance, you're getting a rare treat. You can see the Chilkat Mountain Range. This is Dead Horse Gulch. This is where some 3,000 pack animals were driven to their deaths by greedy miners, anxious to get to the gold fields. Most of the animals were old and just about ready for the glue factory, but their owners found they could get up to $10 for them in Skagway. Here they died of sheer exhaustion. Now, many of you will be disappointed, but we're not going to be crossing this bridge today. We're going to cross on a new bridge a little further up the canyon. The steel bridge was constructed in 1901. At the time of its construction, it was the tallest cantilever bridge in the world, at 215 feet high. Its use was discontinued in 1969 after the railroad was renovated to handle heavy loads of lead and zinc from the mines in the Yukon Territory. This is the White Pass Trail. the Trail of 98. We're approaching the White Pass summit. During the Klondike gold rush, when the stampeders arrived at the summit, they had to clear Canadian customs. The Northwest Mounted Police wouldn't let anyone into Canada unless they had a year's supply of goods, which was about 2,000 pounds of supplies. Once they cleared customs, they continued on to Lake Bennett, 20 miles north of here. The elevation here at the summit is 2,865 feet. We've climbed this over a distance of 20 miles at an average of 2.6%, 141 feet per mile. The steepest grade on the line is 3.9%, or 206 feet per mile. On behalf of the White Pass and Yukon route, I'd like to welcome you all to the country of Canada. We've now entered into British Columbia. Mile 23, top of the world. This is a subalpine climate zone, a marked contrast to Skagway, where we were at the northern tip of the southeast Alaska rainforest. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just a few minutes away from our arrival at Fraser, BC. Fraser was another water stop for the rotary snowplow fleet. The two-story tank building still remains. The last such structure on the railroad. Canadian Customs and a Yukon Highways maintenance facility are also located here. All passengers continuing north with us should remain on board the train. The years following the gold rush were quiet and peaceful for the White Pass. We continued to be the major supply route for goods into the Yukon and for minerals leaving, although not always operating at a profit. As a matter of fact, if it wasn't for World War II, the company might have folded. From 1942 until 1946, the railroad was leased to the United States Army. Afterwards, it weathered the boom and bust of the Yukon's mining economy until 1982, when metal prices slumped so far that it closed. Happily, though, in 1988, the sound of the trains could once again be heard through the Skagway River Valley. It reopened as a summer excursion railroad. We now operate from mid-May until mid-September and are one of the most popular attractions in all of Alaska. On the left-hand side of the train, we're coming up to Beaver Lake. Once again, this is Beaver Lake. The lake to our left is Lake Lindeman, the headwaters of the Yukon River. The Yukon River gets its start about 20 miles from Skagway, then flows some 2,000 miles before it enters the Bering Sea in northwest Alaska. During the Klondike Gold Rush, a few of the stampeders stopped here at Lindeman to build their boats, but most of them continued on to Lake Bennett. Lake Bennett, British Columbia. Milepost 40.6. White Pass and Yukon Railroad passenger service to Bennett also serves the hikers on the Chilkoot Trail.
For those who hanker to do the Chilkoot the hard way, it's 33 miles long and accessible only by foot. Billed as the longest museum in the world, the route takes from 3 to 5 days to
We
hike.
take lots of peanut butter.
Self-sufficiency is the key,
Oatmeal.
and with few amenities, hikers need to be well prepared.
Live in your life. This is actually enough food for like
7 days.
7 days.
Approaching the 3,600-foot level, the summit, the climate becomes subarctic. In '98, a writer for Harper's Weekly wrote,
The eye catches the movement. The mountain is alive. There's a continuous moving train. They are perceptible only by their movement, just as ants are. Never did men look so small.
Martha Black, a stampeder from Chicago, described it in more graphic terms.
The Chilkoot is the worst trail this side of hell.
Today, a single ascent is challenge enough, but at the time of the gold rush, it was commonplace to make the journey 20 times to comply with the Mounties' requirements and pack supplies for a year. The alternative route was the White Pass. Regardless of which you took, Lake Bennett was the immediate goal. From here, it's a mere 550 miles to Dawson City. Of the estimated 30,000 stampeders who spent the winter here, most whiled away the hours building boats. All you had to do was cut down the trees, haul them to a site near the water, whipsaw the lumber into planks, assemble your boat, and seal the cracks. Then wait for the ice to go out. And when they were not building boats, they built this church. When the ice melted, the boats were launched. The stampeders were gone, and so too the congregation. The arrival of the railway changed everything. Completed in July of 1900, it made international headlines. The Daily Alaskan described the completion of the 110-mile marathon as an epoch in transportation affairs of the North. The first passenger train is through, the first to make the continuous run from Skagway to Whitehorse. Today, for the footsore climbers of the Chilkoot, the arrival of the train is almost as much a relief as it was to the stampeders.
After going 33 miles over this historic hiking trail from the gold rush days, hikers are able to board the train here at Bennett and then make the return journey back to Fraser or to Skagway. The Lake Bennett excursion also gives us a chance to go up on the top of the hill overlooking Lake Bennett and see the old St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church building. You'll have a half hour here in Lake Bennett. And when you hear the whistle, that means you have 5 minutes before we depart.
That bit of railroad between Skagway and the White Pass summit, I think, is the most magnificent 20 miles of railroad anywhere in the world. No question about it. Sawtooth Mountains and the great glaciers.
Everyone should come. I mean, everyone.